This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, created because, through no fault of your own, you've become one. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and I know how it feels when you're getting ground down by people issues, constantly firefighting and wondering how on earth you ended up here. In each episode, I invite a guest to discuss a topic and give you 3, sometimes more, top tips that will help you in your leadership role. They are experts in the field, and you'll find out why they do what they do and what took them down that path. For more resources to help you on your leadership journey, check out thereluctantleader.academy, where you'll find details of how to join the Reluctant Leader Success Path. So let's see who's in the hot seat this week. Today I'm talking to Susan Heaton-Wright. Susan is an impact, communications and speaking trainer for emerging leaders and the creator of the Superstar Communicator philosophy. She is an international speaker, the MD of award-winning music company Viva Live Music, podcaster and former prize-winning international opera singer. She delivers seminars, workshops and individual training for many companies including AstraZeneca, Shell and AXA. She is regularly interviewed on BBC Radio 5 Live, BBC Two, local radios and international podcasts. Susan has contributed to articles in Forbes, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Thrive Global, The Scotsman and trade publications. Susan is a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, the Royal Society of Arts and the Incorporated Society of Musicians. She leads a project of musicians in Greece annually to deliver music workshops to refugees in Athens as part of the Love Without Borders charity. I hope you enjoy this chat we had about superstar communication, and I'll catch you all on the other side. Susan, welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
It's going to be an interesting one today, talking about superstar communicating. And I think that's all. There's one thing that I always get people, they always say things about leadership and that sort of realm is that it's all about the communication. So I think when we talk about communicating, it's really important in that we need to get our message across, isn't it? And that's the thing that we need to get that so it lands and we can actually move on. So, but before we get stuck into that topic, the question I always ask my guests is, why do you do what you do, and what was the pivotal moment that took you down this route?
That's such a good question. You know, I was someone who was very shy as a teenager and really struggled to get heard. And I'm sure that it will resonate with many of you when other people laugh at you when you're reading in class. And it reached the point when I went for an interview as a 16-year-old to WH Smith. I didn't say a word and they didn't offer me a job. And I paid at the age of 17 another prefect to lead the prayers when it was my turn to do it. And even at 19, when I was at university, when you had to deliver a paper to the rest of your tutorial group, I was terrified. There were 4 in the tutorial group, so it wasn't a massive group. But I went on from that eventually to become an international opera singer. So I was singing as a soloist in front of 3,000 people. But I looked back to my younger self and realised that I'd never been introduced to, let alone acquired the skills that can help you with managing your nerves and really making an impact when you speak. And it is for that reason I know people that are amazing, perhaps are amazing leaders or amazing within a team, who are struggling to get heard for whatever reason or are being undervalued.
Right, yeah, so that's quite a powerful thing. So you avoided doing what you do now when you're younger, and now I guess that makes you more passionate about it because you know the difference it makes.
Oh, absolutely. And I think back to certain situations when I was younger, and I must admit it's a bit of an Achilles heel for me, that when I feel that I'm being undervalued or overlooked because people don't think that I'm right for that role, I know what it's like. And you know, I've got a number of examples when I was younger, when really I was undervalued and my intelligence and perhaps my skill set was not seen for what it was. And I know that there are people out there who are absolutely brilliant that are doing that in the workplace now. And there's part of them thinking, oh, why didn't I get noticed? Or why did they just ignore what I said in that meeting? And it's for that reason alone that I love what I do, because I hear back from my clients and they say, I nailed it. They heard what I said and they're running with it.
Yeah, fantastic. I know how that feels, that there's something that stops you from speaking up. And I suppose it goes back to a bit of mindset, doesn't it? It's about what you think people are going to think of you, and trying to not think too much of that, isn't it? Is that something that you come across a lot?
Yes, it is. And certainly within my communications model that I've created, Superstar Communicator, one of the first things that I do working with people is for them to think about their message from the audience's perspective, how it might land for them, how you can create the message that will really resonate with them so it will make an impact.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of people speak, and I do a bit of speaking myself. And I think the thing that I've learned along the way is that you can obviously get the skills. That's important. And we'll talk a bit more about those skills as we go along. But for me, what I've the position I come from now is understanding where I'm coming from. And so I can get my message across from the place of, rather than just dictating and telling people stuff, you have to tell the story of why this is important. And I guess story is a big thing, isn't it, when it comes to getting a message across?
Oh, absolutely. So the way we are as human beings is that we are partly dictated to by our emotions, and storytelling is so we have had stories told to us from when we were babies and children. We know that there's going to be a positive outcome. We know the structure of a story. We know that there's a journey of perhaps some challenge, and everything works out for itself in the end. And so to be able to use storytelling within a message, whether that's a podcast like this or a presentation, people are able to remember how they feel when they hear that story far more than any statistics. So you know as well as I do that you can use statistics and then you use a case study, a story, to underline what you're saying. And it's the story that people will remember.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to remember as well, doesn't it? Because you sort of, I think it's because you connect with it emotionally, don't you? And rather than just give facts and figures, it's actually, you can sort of feel what the speaker is actually feeling almost, and that's the trick, isn't it? Is to get that emotion in that you're feeling into what you're saying, and that lands, and it's easier to remember in some way. And I suppose there's some sort of psychology around that and why that works. But I can definitely understand that when someone is talking about something that they've actually experienced, then rather than just telling something that actually doesn't really resonate, you can sort of pick it up, can't you, quite quickly?
Absolutely. And in the case for me, it would be very easy for audiences or clients to say, well, it's okay for you. You were an opera singer. You don't know what it's like to get nervous. But when I tell them my personal journey from that shy teenager and the fact I really, really do understand, then that's what's powerful for them, using that as an example.
So can you remember back to the moment you realised that, I've got to do something about this, and sort of... and what that action was, what the first step you took?
Well, since we're going down the storytelling route, it's worthwhile if you don't mind me sharing another little story, which was pivotal for me. Unfortunately, I was involved in a very, very serious accident in Kenya, and I was the only survivor, and I was very, very lucky to be found. And I was treated in a little tiny bush hospital where they checked my pulse every 15 minutes for 3 days, and I survived. I mean, but I had a lot of physical injuries, life-changing injuries, and obviously had post-traumatic shock disorder as well. But I came back to United Kingdom to be treated eventually when I was well enough to be moved. And after about a year, a friend of mine said, "Why don't you come along to this choir? But you'll have to audition." And I'd always sung in choirs. I could sing any line. I was one of those at school. And I just started singing, and the conductor, who's now a very famous international conductor, said, Stop. You need to get your voice trained. This is a remarkable voice." And so I was quite surprised, but I went and had singing lessons, which was a great therapy for me as well. And I had to push myself really hard to get myself into the limelight. And I did go to music college. I got scholarships, and I studied in United Kingdom and in Italy, where I got an Italian scholarship. But I was forced into facing this, but also I was given those skills and ways to manage your nerves and manage how you perform. So I was actually, although it was quite stressful and very competitive, all of a sudden I had the opportunity to catch up with my peers who had probably been singing as a soloist from when they were 9 years old.
Right. So that conductor, or whoever it was that spotted your voice and gave you that advice, is obviously that was a pivotal meeting. That person, obviously, from doing that, obviously set you down a path of becoming the opera singer that you became, which is you look back on these moments, don't you, and you think, wow, if that guy had never said anything, then I might not have ever taken this path.
Absolutely. And not only that, but the music was very, very healing for me at a time when, life was not easy at all. But I actually wrote to him, care of his agent, and I had a letter back saying, "Do you know, I do vaguely remember because you came in on sticks." And so I know. And he said, "Yeah, your voice really, really hit me. And I'm so glad you took up my advice."
Yeah,
I never contacted him, and maybe if I'd been in a different place, I would have contacted him earlier to see if there was any advice or anything, But I didn't use the contact. Did it on my own, and yeah.
Wow, that's a powerful story. But it just shows, doesn't it, that we all need someone to actually give us a bit of a send us in a direction if they see something is to just say something. If you see someone that has got some talent, give them some advice so they can actually take some steps to make the most of it.
I agree with you. I believe that we all have an inner maestro in us. If we refer to him as Il Maestro, because we do see things in other people. I suppose our ego gets in the way sometimes if we think, but I'm good at this. But actually, you do have a duty to other people as other human beings to say, do you know what? That's great. You do that more because that's where you should be.
Well, I think there's nothing better than actually, seeing something in someone and and bringing it out in them. You know, back in my retail days, we used to have a lot of 16-year-olds that used to come, and it was their first job, and they've never really dealt with anything in the public arena. And, you know, and from the time they joined us and the time they leave, which was generally 18 when they went to either got a job or went on to university, you know, one of the big joys of that is actually seeing them how they just get that confidence that, you know, they need, which will stand them in good stead. So that I think that's a really important message for anybody that's out there. They see anybody that's you think, well, that person's got more than they're actually, you know, showing, and just give them a bit of a quiet word in the right idea and send them on their way. I think it's an important thing to do. But anyway, we sidetracked a bit from the subject. So you got in, and don't apologise, that was my questioning. So you got into singing, but now you're into helping people communicate in various ways. And tell us about those different ways that you help people with that communicating.
Well, very much because of my background, being a stage animal, ironically now, very much I see that I'm empowering people to create impactful performances. So with the content that they have, with their body language, the way they perform, and also their voices. So if I were to use an example of somebody that perhaps is in a meeting and wants to make sure that they're noticed, but not one of those shouty people, because we always have shouty people in meetings, but someone that has really got something considered to say, but to make sure that they are able to share a message, that it lands really well with the audience, but that their body language and vocally, they are impactful so that people notice them.
Right. So let's pick that apart a bit. So let's talk about the voice. I've written down a few words to prompt and remind me, but obviously people got different accents, and that's worth sort of mentioning how that impacts. But when we talk about our voice, what can we do that really will help us let the message land a bit better than maybe it's previously landed?
Okay. One thing that I always say, whether you have an accent or not, whether your voice is very quiet or too loud or husky or whatever, we need to make it as easy as possible for other people to listen to us. So if we've got a very, very strong accent, or if we speak very quietly, or it's, dare I say it, a voice that the sound of the voice isn't very pleasant, or you're speaking too fast, other people are going to switch off. Mm. So as with everything, make it as easy as possible for the other person. If you speak very, very fast and you're aware of it, try and slow down, consciously try to slow down. If you've got a really, really strong accent, and by the way, we all have an accent. It's not just people from Surrey that don't have an accent. You do actually have an accent, love.
Right. Okay.
You know, one of my neighbours around the corner, he's from Glasgow, and he does a lot of training within the health and safety area. He knows if he goes up to Glasgow, he can speak with a strong Glaswegian accent. Fantastic. But he knows that if he's training down here, and I live in Hertfordshire, he has to modify things a little bit. He speaks slightly slower. He doesn't use local slang, and he is very, very clear with his diction to make sure that everybody in the room really understands him.
Mm. So the one thing there that I picked up is it's understanding who your audience are, and so that you don't just you can't just go into every audience and just be the same. You've got to do a bit of homework, I guess.
I think so. I believe that taking the time to understand who your audience is. So, for example, it might be that I'm speaking to an audience where, with respect, most of the people speak English as their non-native tongue. Now, not only do I need to make sure that I speak slightly slower, because I don't know how good their English is, but also use vocabulary that is perhaps slightly less sophisticated, not because they're not intelligent, but they're more likely to understand the content.
Yes, isn't that one of the things that puts people off more than anything, is when we start introducing too much jargon for a start, and then also getting a bit too technical with an audience maybe that really aren't really at that stage, and getting too much into the detail. Is that something you see a lot of?
Yeah, and quite often in presentations, people throw in an awful lot of detail when in fact what's required is what I call top level information, because then people can ask questions if they need more detail, or it might be that they're provided with a pack of more information. Well, why repeat that? Yeah.
And you also mentioned about body language. So how does that fit into the when you're speaking? How can we make the most of our body language, and what are the mistakes that people make?
Do you know that the Meridian communications model that people still quote, or more importantly misquote? I went back to his original work, and what he basically says, and it makes complete sense, is that if you're saying something, you need to make sure that the content of what you're saying matches the tone of your voice and your body language. So if you're saying something very impactful like, I'm a future leader within this organization, and you've got a little voice that's saying, I'm going to be a future leader of this organisation, and you've got closed body language, perhaps your head's down and your arms and legs are crossed in a very sort of small position, that's going to confuse your audience. So what you need to do is to make sure that the content of what you say and vocally and your body language all matches.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I've got another word written down here which says charisma, and which I suppose charisma really is about actually connecting with your audience, but actually they are connecting with you so that you're coming through as authentic and genuine, and that this message is, I'm not just reading from a script. It's something that I feel passionate about, and that's something that I guess you have to work on, because it's not easy, is it?
No, there are some people that they've just got it from the word go. And going back to music college times, there were people there who were utterly charismatic. Now, it might have been they were born like that. There's a possibility that from a young age they were performing and everybody was telling them how wonderful they were, which they were, and they had acquired those skills at a very young age to really understand about engaging with and connecting with their audience.
Yeah, and a lot of this is very much connected to having an idea of about yourself. I talk about in my leadership talks about knowing me, knowing you, and understanding yourself. And how you come across to others, and it's having that sort of emotional intelligence to understand that I am me, and other people are other. They're all their own people, but understanding where you're coming from and how your message tends to land, and that's a key element. I think that it has to come across somehow, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Understanding your audience, what they need, why they're there. How you could challenge them if it's that particular sort of message or presentation is crucial, and putting the time in to do that makes a difference.
Yeah. I tend to watch a lot of TED Talks, and there's some great ones, and then there's some awful ones. There's not too many awful ones, because actually to get to do a TED Talk, they're quite strict, and there's obviously a lot of people that want to do them. So there's not too many that come through, and so I guess that's a good place to look for, examples of good presentations and how to present yourself well. Is that?
That's an interesting one, because obviously they're quite short.
Yes.
And those people that are speaking will have been trained up.
Mm.
They have training beforehand and they have rehearsals on that stage. Now, you know as well as I do from speaking that you don't always have that luxury of having some rehearsals, technical rehearsals and things like that before you give your talk.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, get that.
But having said that, they TEDx, each individual one, they employ very, very good training for their speakers. Now, their speakers, with respect, there are some that might not have spoken before, but they are trained up to do that 10 minutes so well that they can do that.
Yeah. So as we're on the subject of training, I know obviously that's part of what you do, but
Yes.
Is there any other sort of places where people can learn to be better speakers?
With respect of getting some experience, just go out there. I work closely with a charity in Hertfordshire, and alongside them, we have worked on what's called an ambassador program. So individuals volunteer, and they might do a 5-minute presentation on behalf of the charity, or go and collect a check, or things like that. And I've provided them with some training. There are lots of charities who are desperate to have people to represent them, to do presentations to local community groups. And the great thing is that you are learning in a very safe atmosphere. You're giving back to a charity, and you're not putting too much pressure on yourself whilst gaining those new skills.
Right, yeah, that's good advice. I've never thought about that. Yeah, so yeah, I'm sure there's organisations that are always looking for people to represent them, and it's good experience in a receptive audience that hopefully aren't there to boo you and throw tomatoes at you, because that's and I think isn't that what puts people off? That obviously we're going back to your mindset when you when you stand in front of an audience, whatever that audience is, whether it's your team or whether it's people that you don't really know. It's actually getting that place where you have got something in your head that you are in a positive mindset, and that you're not thinking that for some reason these people are not going to want to listen, or they are, they are there to see you fail, because people aren't like that. People want to see you succeed, don't they?
Yes. Well, psychologically, if you have an intention, if you have a sort of vision or a target of something that you're going to say, that can override the fear. So if I have a target that I must say this thing, I must share this with the group, and you're focused on that, then you're going to neutralize all of those negative little voices that are going on. Oh gosh, they're all going to laugh at me. I'm going to get sacked. I'm going to be demoted from this job because of saying this.
Yeah, so it really is just getting that right place.
Yeah,
Sadly, the time is running out. It goes so fast, these 30 minutes. But what we tend to do, I always ask my guests, is to leave us with 3 top tips around the topic. So, what would your top tips be around someone that is maybe just starting to venture into the speaking arena, communicating with their team? What were those sort of 3 things that we've probably already covered them, but probably we need to revisit them?
Well, first of all, I would always consider the audience, why they're there, what they want to get out of the meeting or the presentation. What outcomes do you want for your audience? What do you want them to do? Secondly, I would say take time to prepare, whether that's in a meeting or a presentation. Work out what you're going to say. And finally, make sure that the first thing that you say and the last thing that you say are very powerful. The first thing, that it's a really good hook so that they are engaged with what you're going to say. And the last thing, a call to action, whether it is we will meet next week to discuss this further, or I want to have your information by tomorrow, or something like that.
Yeah. So people take action. That's great. Well, thank you, Susan, for your time today. It's been it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the subject, but lots to take on board and great value. So thank you again, and we hope to meet in person one day, because we haven't done that yet.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out thereluctantleader.academy. And if you get a chance, please leave a review on whichever platform you have been listening. And also share the love by sharing the episode with someone who would benefit. Leadership is a choice. If you have the right mindset, know the process to follow, and the key skills to use at each point in the process, you have everything you need to leave a lasting legacy. Don't forget to put into action anything that has struck a chord in this episode. And until next time, be the best you can be.